Hello world, Great Giza Pyramid. Today we're going to talk about the Great Giza Pyramid structure, the primary structure that is thought of on the Giza Plateau in Cairo. First off, we all know it's a very large structure. What you usually don't focus on is the surface of the structure. And in the surface of the structure, you'll notice that there are steps down here that are fairly large, and then it actually has areas where they get a wave pattern, and you can get a better look at this by going to surface, surface .giza.ws. That'll take you to a measurement of that. Now, there was a gentleman in the, I think it was 2016-17 time, went through there with a stereo drone, and that would actually be better because then we'll get the surface of the entire faces of the structure, not just the generalism, but this will get you the generalism, and you can see there's a very large sweeping pattern. Now, what does that do? Well, if you take this structure, it's, 450-ish feet tall, actually at that point right there, because the top of it's not there. I'm not saying it's missing, it's not there. In fact, if you look, there's a very cool rock garden up there, and that rock garden has form and function. We can go over that in a different video, but there's nothing missing from the top. Intentionally was never there. Anyway, what this would do is brush discharge electrostatic energy would fall on the surface of anything, trees, antennas, it doesn't matter what it is. And that's part of the reason why on an antenna we have grounding planes and stuff. This down here acts as a resistance from the general static electricity from getting to ground, because these are larger steps. In fact, the one at the 35th level, which is in concert with or in agreement with the inside structure they like to call the Queen's Chamber, that's a very important one because that keeps the static electricity quarantined for the most part to the top face of the structure. In fact, the way the steps are, it's more quarantined to the top area there. Now that area actually coincides with where the energy is brought into the structure and utilized in what they like to call the King's Chamber. But that's a whole nother story. Well, it's not a whole nother story. It's part of the same story. But what we're going to focus on is the movement of the water today. We're not going to really focus on the movement of the electricity. So in here we have, and you can gladly look at much better pictures and photos of this. I am just doing this quick freehand, just to give you the idea. Let's see, you got the area that comes down there, the area that comes down here, the grotto, which is at ground level. Actually, if I had done it right, the grotto is right here at ground level. And then that comes down where it joins the shaft that comes from here down to what they like to call the unfinished room. You got the little bubble there, you got the pit here, and you've got the tail that goes out the side there. All right, and there's a pit here. These are the only two areas where they touch earth. Everything else is in a limestone bath or fabricated bath. And for this, what happens is when this whole thing is saturated with water, the water level is actually here, is just below the walkway level of the hallway that I like to call the Queen's Chamber. I like to call this the this is the condensation room, this is the arc chamber, and this is the combustion chamber. Basically what happens is this engine down here, if you want to refer to it as, is constantly separating the water into its two respective parts, hydrogen and oxygen. The oxygen vents out. Now it does some work as it vents out, and I go into that on my System Down Under videos, but the main flow is the air is just a byproduct. It goes out. The hydrogen is what's captured, and it comes up and circulates into this chamber. Now it circulates into this chamber by first going back and forth through a series of channels up there, then circling down to a pit that they dug in and is now covered by a metal plate. If you actually get a tour there, you can go into the back corner, step on it. It's a metal plate that's painted to look like rock, but there's like a 10-foot hole in there. Now the gas actually comes up through there, that's the flashback arrestor, and comes up into this room. Now what's going to happen is the static electricity is going to be a perfect scenario for a spark in here. The spark actually takes place on that one vent that goes out. That's the only one and only one that breaches the surface of the structure, and that is where the oxygen then comes in. The oxygen being what our air is 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, and 1% carbon dioxide and other trace elements. You know, you should learn that in 7th grade physical science, and if you haven't, well, this is hard to understand. And the water is H2O. Okay, now the O is broken off here, the H is broken off here. The H goes up, comes to there. The O is brought in from the outside. Just, you know, nature will do that. You got a spark from the static electricity. You're going to have an explosion. That's why I call it the combustion room. It's going to start a fire. Now, the way this room is engineered is actually quite cool. It pools the water. Actually, it pools it in there. Pools the water so that the water itself is the control valve. As the water goes up, it blocks off this entrance, and as the water recedes down, it brings more air in. The air as well as the nitrogen. But the nitrogen, I believe at this point, is a byproduct, unless, as we actually work this, put it into CAD or actually make a physical model, we might also be playing potentially with some ammonia or some other derivative thereof. But, because that would be N, what was it, H3N, or H3N or N3H, I forget what it is, but it's hydrogen and nitrogen, and there's going to be an abundance of nitrogen. But we're going to skip over that, because I'm just focusing on the water. The water condensates. Now in here, it actually, since there's a combustion here, the steam, this is fairly hot water, or if you want to look at it, evaporation, will be going up this channel, which does not breach the surface, but does tie into this ball of static electricity, where you're going to get condensation and droplets of water. That water will run down, fall into the system, come down through the system, and down. It will eventually go down to the grotto and feed back into there. Now, in the process of doing that, anyone who knows anything about water and really looks into it, 1 out of every about 7,000 particles of water is heavy water, which is D2O instead of H2O. In this whole system, you're going to be refining and or collecting the heavy water in this pool here. And they do that through a series of gates to get it down into here. You can, you know, if you ever look at a 3-phase separator, how, you know, the heavy particles can't make it over a barrier. Same thing here. You got your heavy water, and, you know, nature's turning up and down the light on me. You have a little gap before the spillway down into here, and that spillway is capped off as well. That's really just to give this static electricity a path to ground, so it always has a path to ground, a control, but you're actually tapping it off and controlling it in this room. And that this is just a piece of the Giza Plateau. The other structures next to it play a part in this system as well, but really what you want to see is the water flow, and that water flow then brings down the energy into this room where all the condensation is happening, and as the more condensation occurs, the surface area to hold the static electricity depletes, and eventually that static electricity has to go somewhere. And you give it 2 options that are within this structure, and this doesn't actually go outside the structure. You give it 2 options, one of which is a tiny bit closer to what they like to call the, what do they call that? Oh, the thing in the corner. Anyway, what's on the side? And there's a tail that goes out through there too. This room is quite amazing in itself. This whole structure is amazing. But that's basically the main overflow of what is occurring within this structure. Now, you want to call my bluff, you go ahead, and I will be glad to challenge you with photos and videos and physical experiments that document how this itself is a functioning toy. What it exactly does, we will have to build a model to find out, because like I said, this is just a piece. There are several other structures upon the plane that go in concert with it. Thank you.